The theme park was abandoned, the no trespassing and private property signs rusting and worn with age, and from the outside looking in, it appeared as if the park had remained untouched for 2 years. But the fresh blood pooling at the entrance? Well, that was new. And Mara Forrest was only partially aware of what and who was waiting for her on the other side of that gate. Reminding many of the PlayStation 1 Resident Evil game and reminding me of Parasite Eve, it's a survival horror, but also a game about exploration where you can gather clues and solve lots and lots and lots of puzzles. So if mostly abandoned theme parks, mutated humanoids, and the dark side of human innovation are your thing, then this might be the game for you. I'm Mo, and this is your spoiler warning, because tonight we're talking about Crow Country, which the developers have described as an exploration of reckless human greed, and the idea of an unforgivable sin. So sit back, get cozy, and let the nightmare begin. The year is 1990, and a girl is driving her Ford Fiesta on a dirt road, heading southeast of Atlanta, Georgia. If anyone asked, my name is Mara, she thinks to herself. Mara Forrest. Special Agent Forrest. That's me. Don't forget. Don't mess it up. Mara arrives at Crow Country, the now abandoned theme park, and reviews her police file. It's a missing persons report from the Atlanta, Georgia Police Department. We're searching for the park's owner, Mr. Edward Crow, age 57. He was last seen by a Mr. Tolman at his estate and was reported missing by his daughter, Natalie Crow. The file says that the incident was reported to Officer Harrison, whose badge number is 05061. Strange. Mara Forrest also has the same badge number, so it's clear from the very beginning that Mara isn't who she says she is. But who is she really? That's just one of the mysteries this game reveals with time, and admittedly, fairly quickly if you're looking at the right clues. Mara loads her gun, shoots the lock on the gate, and enters the park through the staff parking entrance. First opened 4 years ago in 1986, Crow Country features quite a few nature-inspired attractions, with crows being the primary mascot. A group of crows can be called a horde, a mob, or a murder. They're all black feathers resembling someone attending a funeral, and if you look at some of the symbolism for crows, they often represent death and can be considered tricksters and messengers that are capable of existing between the worlds of the living and the dead. And as the story progresses, you'll find that these meanings foreshadow a lot. But there's also a fairy tale town, a haunted hilltop, the Ocean Kingdom attraction, and a futuristic area that was never finished. At the main thoroughfare, Mara sees multiple crows gathered around a sickly, gooey substance. When she inspects it, she wonders what it could be. An animal, maybe? She can't make out any of its features, so it's hard to say. Within the bathroom, she finds a paranormal magazine published 3 years ago, in which an aspiring paranormal photographer named Arthur Mole sent in a Polaroid of something strange he found while exploring the amusement park. The photo is blurry and partially resembles a human, but just barely. Adjacent to the bathroom is a backpack that has also been left behind, with the words UFO Tour 1988 embroidered on the front, suggesting that perhaps Mara isn't alone here, after all. And with the other locations inaccessible for now, she must enter Fairy Tale Town to learn more. The attractions in this area are lined with quaint little mushrooms, wooden barrels, and... hold on, what's this? The numbers 2106 have been written on multiple newspapers spread across the ground like a banner, the numbers red and appearing to have been written in blood. Mara wonders if it's a code for something, and up until the very end of the game, we the players are wondering the same thing. And you might find yourself entering these numbers on every keypad you find, but you would be wasting your time. As she passes by a giant mushroom house and the entrance to the fairy pond, she also finds a Polaroid camera. It looks broken, and the photo of more humanoid creatures is stained with blood as well. It's becoming increasingly clearer that something is very wrong with this park, especially once she finds Arthur Mole lying against a barrel, his leg wounded, his hand draped across his stomach in pain. "They attacked me," he says. "All I wanted was proof, a better, clearer photo." Mara asked who or what attacked him, but Arthur doesn't know what they are, calling them things, then people. Mara isn't sure what to think, but she knows he's bleeding badly and needs help, so she bandages his leg and takes him back to her car where he'll be safe. She inquires how Arthur feels, questioning if he has a headache and feels queasy now too. This is because the same thing that attacked him attacked her too in the past, so she knows what it feels like. We learn from this interaction that Mara is indeed looking for Edward Crowe, the owner, but not necessarily to retrieve him as a missing person. There's something she wants to tell him, and she knows he's in the park somewhere. But to find him, she must return to Fairy Tale Town and solve many puzzles that ultimately help her obtain 3 keys needed to access every area in the park. The bronze key is required first, and it can be found within the fairy pond. The only problem is Mara requires the right verbal password to enter. Throughout the park, memos from past employees offer various hints to solving each puzzle, and we learn from one of them that the password is located in Crowe's employee lounge. And it's through the staff hallway to this location that Mara experiences her first encounter with the humanoids that Crowe has nicknamed the Guest. They're bloody, disfigured, partially dressed, and they're lunging toward Mara with arms outstretched. She shoots and they go down. They smell horrible, like an infected wound. She feels bad for killing them, but also would feel worse to leave them alive in the state they're in. At the end of the hallway, she also finds a large crate addressed to Marvin Trumbull in Para, Brazil. Within is a lot of gold ore, and you're probably wondering why. Throughout the game, we find notes between Marvin Trumbull and Edward Crowe, like this one in the Cosmic Future area. In the note, Marvin found a site for the gold mine in Brazil. There's a disused mine there that wouldn't take much for it to look the part. In the lounge, there are also a couple of books on the history of the 1848 gold rush and owning a mining business. So it's apparent that there is an undercover mining operation going on here. But how does this tie into the nightmare that Mara is currently experiencing? We'll put a pin in that for now and let Mara continue to explore the lounge where more lore can be discovered. It's here where we first find records from Mr. Tolman, Crowe's main engineer and the last person to have seen him before his disappearance. The record, dated March 21st, 1988, describes an unsettling event in which Edward Crowe calls him on his car radio to report an intruder underground. A man disfigured and making horrible noises has appeared near a location known as the pool, but strangely all the security doors to this area have been locked for days, the alarm only being triggered at this point. Tolman attempts to communicate with his guest through the intercom, but he can't speak, and his clothes barely fit him from all the swelling and disfigurement. There's also a legal summons recalling an event that happened in July 1988, shortly after the guest's first appearance. 15-year-old Elaine Marshall was attacked in Crowe Country during normal park hours, and the Marshall family has sued Edward Crowe for the incident and is holding him accountable. Lastly is the verbal password that we need, and with this information found, Mara can now enter the fairy pond to retrieve the bronze key. Along the way, we start to see that the humanoids are not the only types of enemies that we'll face. Some don't even appear to be human anymore, as they're now blobs of flesh, pulsating organs, and tendrils. To make it to the fairy that guards the entrance to the pond, call out to her, and the green fairy will ask Mara to agree to protect our precious natural world. And I couldn't help but notice the contrast of this environmentally friendly fairy in the midst of this mining cover-up, which is known to cause water and air pollution, deforestation, and other things. One of the staff memos noted that Tolman's office is behind the fairy pond, but when Mara enters the hallway, the entrance is locked. She does, however, find a cyborg crow hidden in the hallway wall. A note left behind by its designer credits the inspiration for its design to someone named Ophelia, someone they were close to. But when she passed, the designer shelved the project. With Tolman's office currently inaccessible, Mara now must use the bronze key to explore other areas of the park. One such place is the train room at the main thoroughfare, and while the train yields a prize for solving their puzzle later on, we're more interested in the portraits hanging on the wall. Viewing them gives us our first glimpse at Natalie Crowe, Edward's daughter, Douglas Pike, the primary builder and operator of Crowe Country, and Tolman, Edward's mining engineer. There's also another account from Tolman's records here, dated March 23, 1988, 2 days after the humanoid first appeared in the pool area. He is now contained in the lab underground, and Crowe nicknamed him the Guest. The Guest won't eat or drink, and Crowe refuses to seek medical attention for him. Tolman has requested that Crowe shut down all root excavation, but Crowe refuses this as well, and Tolman feels they're about to make things a lot worse, and he would be correct. What are the roots? We don't know, at least not yet. But to learn more about this guest, Mara must then use the bronze key to enter the haunted hilltop, where she will find a woman with a briefcase knocking on a metal door. This is Julie Barron, the lawyer who is representing the Marshall family in the case against Edward Crowe. Mara offers to go around the haunted manor to find another entrance, and when entering the crypt, we see a familiar name. Here lies Ophelia. The marker on her tomb reads, "Tragically drowned. Daughter, sister, human." Now the phrase human is nothing more than a nod to a puzzle to obtain a healing item, but Ophelia was referenced before when we found the cyborg Crow, and now we know her fate. Mara solves the first puzzle within the crypt, enters the back room, and finds a letter from Marvin to Edward Crowe. Marvin said he had finally set up an address in Brazil for Edward to send the ore, asking Edward to label it as samples of geological interest in hopes of passing the cargo off as academic research. Marvin plans to collect the shipments once a week and deposit them into the mine, so it appears as if the gold was originally mined in Brazil and not Georgia. There's also an elevator that would take Mara underground to the pool area and other locations, but it's currently inoperable, so instead she investigates a nearby room. Inside is a machine that drops cylinders of gold onto a conveyor belt, breaks the gold up, then embeds little pieces of gold into rock, creating fake ore. So now the question remains, where is all this gold coming from, and why is Edward Crowe going through this whole elaborate plan to fake the gold's location? And what about the guest? If Mara investigates the unlocked cell next to this room, she'll learn from another of Tolman's records that on March 24th, 1988, now 3 days since the guest first arrived, the storeroom at the haunted hilltop was converted into a holding cell for the guest. Douglas Pike, the park operator, is rightfully unhappy about this, but Edward Crowe plans to conduct tests on the guest and believes it would be easier for him to do so above ground. Tolman once again has reservations over this and is almost immediately proven right, as I'm assuming days later in July, Elaine Marshall found the holding cell within the haunted hilltop, was attacked by the guest, injured, and taken to the hospital. Edward Crowe was then forced to close the amusement park. Ready to let Julie Barron in, Mara leaves the cell and pulls the lever on the steel door. Julie enters and then begins sitting documents on a table directly in front of the elevator, believing Edward Crowe will see them once he returns from underground. The documents include a newspaper article from the Atlanta Globe noting Elaine Marshall's attack, a photo of Elaine at age 15 at the ferry pond, Julie's business card, and then a medical report noting Elaine's condition. Her wounds across the stomach and chest were not healing due to a bacterial infection, and attempts to identify the bacteria's origins have yielded no results. Medical professionals believe a wild animal attacked Elaine, but deny her claims that the animal was a man. Her condition isn't improving with medication, and she reported feeling headaches and queasiness, which, if you recall, Mara and now Arthur Mole, the photographer, have experienced this as well. Julie has left the room and entered the first guest cell, the cell Elaine Marshall was attacked in, and Mara follows. Julie comments on how the cell has been cleaned thoroughly, noting that doing so is evidence of a cover-up. Mara confides in her, telling Julie that she wants to enter Crowe's office, and Julie tells her she must pass through the haunted manor to find it. To enter this haunted house, Mara rings the bell the correct number of times to open the door. But once inside, the staff phone on the wall begins to ring. "You came back? I'll admit, I'm glad to see you're up and about. Oh, the tenacity of youth." Then, he hangs up. And due to the lack of available suspects, I think we can safely assume that man on the line was none other than Edward Crowe. He's alive and he's definitely in the amusement park. So now entering his office is that much more necessary for Mara. If she plays the correct notes on the piano in the manor, a painting will open up, leading her to Pike and Crowe's offices. But Tolman's office isn't here. There is another record though. This one is dated March 27th, 6 days after the first guest. And in it, Tolman confirms that 2 more guests triggered the alarm, having not entered through any doors, but having emerged from the pool itself. Tolman says they're worse than the first, broken, the wrong shape, and falling apart. Crowe spent 23 minutes trying to talk to them, realizing they couldn't be brought above ground like the first. When communicating with them doesn't work, however, he shoots them both. And to add on top of this disturbing turn of events, Natalie Crowe can be found crying in a corner of the room, vomit on the floor beneath her feet. She's complaining of her head. A guest had grazed her, but she thought she'd be fine. Mara gives her an antidote, but going off the medical records, we know this won't help her for long. Nevertheless, she says she feels a little better and is then surprised that Special Agent Mara Forrest is who was sent to investigate her father's disappearance. She wonders about the detective she had spoke to on the phone, Detective Harrison James, but Mara tells her that the detective was having car problems. Natalie tells Mara her father's office is empty, but if she still wants to look around, she'll need to find a gold key and turn off the electrified door handle. How to do this, though, she doesn't know. The handle is a recent installment, and Mara wonders what Crow could be hiding within. So for now, we turn to Pike's office, and inside is a gruesome sight. Pike has ended his own life, the gun beside him on the ground. There's also a VHS tape, and when Mara plays it, Douglas Pike appears on the screen. This is a message for Edward Crow. We've been friends for over 30 years. You entrusted me with the running of your theme park, a task I have relished. You have always shown me kindness and always paid me well for my work. However, I can no longer remain silent. Edward Crow, your crimes have not gone unnoticed, nor will your sins go unpunished. As for Elaine Marshall, I hope she never forgives us, for none of us deserve it. Goodbye. Pike also had a well-organized filing cabinet that contained more information. We learn Crow pulled all funding for the Cosmic Future attraction and halted the construction. During this time, Crow looked sickly, but with a manic energy in his eyes. Pike also tried spying on Tolman and Crow while attempting communication with one of the guests, but he wasn't sure what was going on. Mara decides to venture onward, exiting the back rooms and finding herself in the theater within Fairy Tale Town. Once again, the staff phone rings, and Crow speaks. Listen, I had no idea what the roots were for. How could I have known? There are 7 in total, and I cut them down, cut them open. All but one. We left one intact. For posterity, we thought. What a farce. And this is the second time we hear mention of the roots, but since Crow doesn't give us much to go on, Mara returns to the main thoroughfare only to find a detective standing in front of a pink bicycle. It's Detective Harrison James, and he admits he was supposed to be at Crow Country hours ago, but some kid broke into his car and slashed his tires. Interestingly, Mara doesn't mention being a police officer to the detective. You know, the one whose ID she happens to have. But Detective Harrison seems none the wiser and instead asks Mara if she's seen Natalie Crow. She admits to seeing Natalie, then the detective asks her to return to her car since it's not safe to be alone at night. She agrees, more or less, and the detective leaves to find Natalie. A nearby phone rings, and this time Crow tells Mara about the first guest, the one that arrived 2 years ago. Timing was deliberate, an intersection or pivoting point, late enough that we've developed the necessary infrastructure and just early enough to not be too late. Okay. Off to Ocean Kingdom we go, I guess. A submarine attraction here contains another note from Marvin discussing the buyer he lined up for the gold in Brazil. Marv also wonders if anyone can tell if the fake ore came from Georgia. When Mara leaves the submarine, she sees a giant guest who's holding a gold tube similar to what we saw in the manufacturing room. Defeat them and then head to the Sunken Treasure Arcade to meet none other than Marvin Trumbull himself. He confesses to being Edward's business partner and wants to know if Mara has seen him before saying he's gone and done it, hasn't he? What it is, we don't yet know, but Marv does seem curious about Mara's age and seems to test her regarding the type of gun she's carrying. And Mara, the supposed weapons expert, chooses to deflect and redirect by asking Marvin what kind of work he does with Crow. He's also not providing concrete details, but we know from the notes we found so far about his dealings with the mine in Brazil. He also seems to be leery of running into Tolman and reveals that the elevators leading underground may not be broken after all. He leaves and Mara finds a newspaper article dated August 1988, noting the amusement park's closure. Following Marvin into another staff hallway leads to another phone conversation with Edward Crow. Crow tells Mara that he never really wanted the gold. It was his father who had decided to buy the land, and when he died years later, he left the land to Edward. He felt he had no choice but to come back and finish what his father had started. We also learn that Crow Country is not only the park's name, but the name of the land it's built on as well. After he hangs up, Mara enters Neptune's Palace, the restaurant in Ocean Kingdom. Once again, Edward calls, this time asking Mara to remove Natalie from the park, but when Mara tells him she's been attacked, he simply responds with, "I see," then hangs up. There's also another one of Tolman's records, noting Edward has begun experimenting with the pool by submerging a key into the water, then noting how it's become distorted. Returning to the lounge area through the staff hallway allows Mara to not only find Officer Harrison, but also another letter from Marvin. In this letter, he's nervous about an upcoming inspection for the mines. He's afraid they can detect the minerals in the soil and realize the ore is fake. He's sent soil and rocks from the Brazil mine to Crow to create new ore in hopes of fooling the inspection agents. Mara asks if Harrison has been injured, and thankfully he hasn't, but he also hasn't found Natalie either. He's seen the guest, and Mara warns that if he's not hurt, he should leave as soon as he can. Finding the silver key is the new primary objective, so we must obtain a few items to locate a mask that will unlock the Witchwood at the haunted hilltop. The Witchwood is a literal maze, and navigating to its center will reward Mara with the trident that belongs in Neptune's palace. Mara can then return to the Sunken Treasure Arcade, power it with the key, and solve the puzzle to retrieve a data disk. This disk can be used within the train room and the crypt to get a necessary acid bottle. It can also be used to open the tomb marked Ophelia. Within is an incredibly detailed wax figure of a woman, the same woman mentioned when we encounter the cyborg Crow, and the ID within the tomb tells us she was a nurse at Atlanta Westview Hospital. It also tells us her last name was Pike. She was Douglas Pike's daughter, and he was the creator of the cyborg Crow. This somber realization seems to match the game's pacing as the atmosphere changes. It's raining now, and more guests appear in the hallways. They're far more disfigured than before, and the same number 2106 is written multiple times on the walls in blood. Mara has to speak to Tolman, the engineer. She has to go underground, and when she reaches his office, he's there waiting for her. He's less than helpful, leaving it up to Mara to power the elevators on her own. This task involves watching a series of VHS tapes about different tragedies: the Titanic, the Hindenburg, the 1350 plague, and Hiroshima. All examples of unintended consequences of advancement and innovation. To further reflect on this, there's also another note by Tolman. It's dated March 21st, 1989, almost 1 year after the first incident. The guests are appearing every day, but they can't save them. They're far too gone. And Tolman wants to know where they've come from. He found the code marked on the ground, 2106, but it's not a code for any of their locks. It's not a code at all. With a final warning from Tolman to avoid going underground, Mara leaves his office behind and heads for the elevator. It's dark, but it's not empty. There are guests here too, and 7 different chambers, each labeled with a day of the week, which corresponds to a poem called Monday's Child. There's also another record of Tolman's, this one from July 1988, after the park was closed. Tolman had shut down the root excavation machines, but Crow didn't care. He'd become obsessed with the guest and the pool. He seemed to not even care about shutting down the park or the attack on Elaine Marshall. Within each chamber underground is a large green metallic tube, and these are what we've come to know as the roots. Operating the machines show us that when cut, solid gold is contained within their center, and in the room where you find Tolman's note, one of the guests is strapped to a cot while acid steadily drips on them. The acid that Mara reluctantly fills her bottle with before shutting the tank off and finally ending the guest's torture. Within another area is evidence that the guests were hooked up to a machine and electrocuted until they were nothing more than piles of goo. Down one of the hallways, we find the pink bicycle of Harrison James. Luckily, he's still alive within another root chamber. He was chased by a guest and ended up underground, but he did find Natalie. She was acting strange and didn't want to talk to him. He finally agrees to leave, but Mara can't go with him. Not yet. Determined to find Crow, she ventures forward and finds Marvin and Tolman instead at the Monday root excavation site. It's clear that the two dislike each other, and it's confirmed through their dialogue that Marvin, having had all his assets frozen, has returned to Georgia to hide from Brazilian authorities due to the fake mine. But why? Why all the deceit? Apparently the gold from the roots was too pure, being 24-karat gold, and very abundant. Crow didn't want anyone to connect the gold back to the amusement park or its land, and he didn't want the US government to get involved. But Mara figures out that Crow kept his name out of all the details and paperwork of this mine, leaving Marvin as the sole person to take the fall, so perhaps he hasn't returned just to hide. Mara leaves the two men, finds the generator that powers Crow's electrified locks, and shoots it. She then returns above ground, heading for his office, but not before finding Julie Barron, hidden away in a large shipping crate. Someone grabbed her from behind and threw her in, and Mara suspects it could have been Marvin. Julie offers to help her in any way that she can, and she will be useful later. Now remember that green fairy that let you into the pond and gave you the bronze key? The one Mara actually thanks for helping her? Well, now you get to shoot her head, then pour acid onto the resin block that was inside, causing it to melt but revealing the final key. With the gold key now in hand, Mara can return to Julie and seek her help in operating the controls to a ride in Ocean Kingdom. She boards the boat, takes the battery out of an animatronic mermaid, then returns to the control room only to find that Julie is now missing, blood streaked on the ground where she once stood. There's no evidence of her whereabouts outside the room, so Mara has no choice but to charge the battery underground, then return it to the animatronic crow near the park's entrance. Doing so allows the crow to walk out of its house, revealing a final elevator that Mara can enter. Oh wait, it's off. Let's finally head to Crow's office to turn it on and descend into the depths. His office reveals more lore and clues about what's going on. For starters, Edward has a biochemistry degree, meaning his lab experiments, though ethically unjust, may be for a particular reason. He's also given the other types of guests various names such as Puddles, Spindle, and Goblin, given their different characteristics, but I'll keep referring to them all as guest for clarity's sake. The phone rings in the office, and of course it's Crow again, telling Mara the guest's condition is irreversible, and they can't leave the park to infect anyone else. There are just too many. Meanwhile, an image flashes across the television, a glowing green area that appears to be the pool. Crow admits that as he continued root excavation, the guests became more and more distorted and wrong, many not even bipedal anymore. But he didn't stop. He hangs up and Mara investigates further. There's a control room for the final elevator as well as 2 monitors inside. One is surveying the staff parking lot, and Mara can speak with Arthur through the intercom. He's not feeling great, and she seems reluctant to tell him that she'll return. The other monitor observes one of the more mutated guests, the monitor's wires leading to a steel door beside her. After entering the passcode to unlock the final elevator, the steel doors burst open and the guest from the monitor lunges forward, alarms blaring as Mara takes aim. Once she escapes the control room, Mara finds a photo of Crow in Elaine in the office, and when she examines it more closely, a golden statue of Crow's deceased wife moves away from the wall, revealing a secret room. Within is a tiny root, wriggling back and forth, and Mara wonders if it's alive. A small diary nearby offers a look into Edward's past and the first initial discovery of the roots. He was 10 and a half, excited to go on a camping trip with his father in the then-named Condor Country region of Georgia. While camping, his father found the first root sticking out of the ground, wriggling around. Inspecting it, however, they learned it was not alive, but made of metal. They found a second root nearby, and Crow's father, curious to know what it was made of, cut the tip off, revealing the gold inside. After discovering 4 roots in total, Crow's father bought and renamed the land, keeping their discovery a secret. Mara exits the room only to find Natalie standing beside her mother's statue. Neither she nor Mara are feeling very well, their conditions worsening. Natalie asks Mara what she plans to do once she finds her father. She's convinced Mara is going to kill him. She sees the gun in her hand, the look on her face. She's already made up her mind, hasn't she? Mara denies this at first, but Natalie pleads with her regardless, asking Mara to bring Crow back to her so she can speak with him. Mara agrees, but is it really a promise she can keep? Finally, with everything she needs to meet Edward, Mara leaves the office and heads for the animatronic Crow. The guests within the amusement park, however, all seem to have died. There are now crow-shaped dispensers pumping out gas and the occasional bullet or arrow zipping by, so perhaps a security system is to blame. At the bottom of the central elevator, however, some of the guests have survived. But Officer Harrison wasn't as lucky. And ironically enough, he wasn't attacked by the guest, he was shot. Mara recites his badge number, birthday, and specialty, things she memorized from his ID. He was the original person meant to investigate Crow Country, not Mara. She had tried to stop him, but he wanted to help so badly. Near his body is a grubby sports bag, the one that Marvin Trumbull carried with him, and inside is a box of handgun ammo. And while ammo can be found all over the park, in trash cans, crates, and out in the open, specifically placing it in Trumbull's bag seems to be a dead giveaway as to who shot Detective Harrison James. Moving onward through the underground area, Mara encounters Tolman once again. He doesn't want her to enter the final door where Crow waits for her at the pool. She tells him about Harrison's death, and as they both realize who the culprit is, Marvin appears behind them, holding a gun. He's the one the feds will blame for everything. The officers shouldn't have come, and as for Mara, well, she knows too much now. He can't let her rat them out. He has to get rid of her. But just as he's about to shoot, a nearby vent rattles. The grate burst open, throwing Marvin to his death down below, and Julie peeks her head out, curious where she's ended up. Relieved that she's alive, Mara helps Julie out of the vent and learns that something grabbed her from behind, pulling her into the vent. There were many of them in the pipes, weeping, moaning, and screaming, but they didn't try to kill her. Tolman agrees this is the case. The guests are angry, but they don't want to kill anyone. They're trying to communicate. And Mara has been killing them. And who knows what kind of mental toll this takes on her, but she can't quite think about that just now. She needs to finish what she started. She sends Tolman and Julie back to deal with Harrison's death in whatever way that means, and to check on Natalie and Arthur's conditions. Then she descends down, 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 and further down a ladder, eventually finding herself in Crow's private lab. Taped to the wall are photos of everyone we've seen in the amusement park so far. Natalie, Tolman, Mara, Julie, Arthur, Marvin, Douglas Pike, and Harrison James. There's also illegible writing on a piece of paper, assumably written by one of the guests. There's also a shower in the lab, and if Mara turns it on, the purple dye from her hair washes out, revealing her to be a brunette. And if the clues weren't obvious enough up to this point, we are staring at none other than Elaine Marshall, the girl who was first attacked in Crow Country. And when she speaks with Crow on the intercom, he finally confirms this when he says, "Hello, Elaine." Elaine wants him to open the door, but first he requests she bring the glass vials on his desk filled with a green liquid. There are 5 in total. Vials in hand as requested, Elaine finally enters the very last door to find a rotting, bloodied Edward Crow standing in front of the pool. He's been infected too, that much is clear. He claims that he's glad Elaine came back and asks how she's feeling. Bad. Tired, she says. They can't get rid of my infection. It's getting worse. She's going to die because of this infection. That's what she wanted to tell him all along, but now he has it too. According to Crow, anyone exposed to the guest will become infected, and Crow was the first. When the first guest arrived from the pool, he initially tried to help him, but bringing the guest up to the surface had been a mistake. Elaine wonders why Crow looks far worse than she does, but it's because of his continued exposure to the guest, which has accelerated the process. He then confesses that he knew there was no saving Elaine at the hospital. That's why he didn't pay for her medical expenses. But there is a cure. He's developed one by reverse engineering the infection. The highly infectious bacteria on the bodies of the dead guest is new to mankind and not yet known. And the cure now lies in the 5 vials Elaine has brought to Crow. But with Harrison and Marvin now dead, there are still 6 people infected, but only 5 vials. Elaine notes this, but Crow won't be taking the cure. He gestures to the pond, showing Elaine what's left of the 7 roots, and now Crow finally tells Elaine their true purpose. The pool, you see, is a gateway, and the guests are human beings who attempted to travel through it and ended up in Crow Country. The roots acting as a sort of calibration antenna to the gateway, and Crow has been causing them to malfunction for the last 10 years as he excavated the gold from within them. Now they no longer safely and accurately transport the travelers. Instead, they're severely malfunctioned and causing the guests to mutate, the more the roots are destroyed. The first guest who arrived from the pool was the least mutated. He could actually speak, but barely. He told Crow who he was and why he had come. Crow then wrote this information down, then continued to harvest the roots. Realizing the gravity of his deeds, Crow decided against taking the cure and to pay the price with his life. He tells Elaine he wants to enter the pool and hands her a piece of paper. It's the warning from the guest. The paper reads, 2106, uninhabitable, ruin. We come, 1988. Last chance. Warn, stop, change. As Tolman said, 2106 was never a code. It was never a what, but a when. The people emerging from the pool were from the year 2106, their world mostly uninhabitable due to the actions of mankind throughout the years. And now Crow wants to see what devastation lies on the other side. Elaine knows going into the pool will ensure his death once fully mutated, but Crow makes her promise. If he re-emerges, he wants Elaine to kill him. And with that, Edward Crow sits in his rocking chair and pushes himself backwards into the pool. his body sinking into the green liquid below. But remains of the roots sinks with him, and before Elaine can react, a highly mutated version of Crow emerges. So Elaine does what she promised, and in doing so, breaks her promise to Natalie. Crow Country is now 4 miles away. Elaine, Tolman, Natalie, Julie, and Arthur sit around a campfire, each with a vial of the cure in hand. And Elaine has a thought. It's something frequently stated throughout the game, every time the player chooses to save by interacting with a fire source. Staring into the flames, I feel something. It's a curious mixture of hope and dread. Maybe everything will be okay, and maybe it won't. One of Crow Country's strongest selling points is its sense of place and atmosphere, achieved through its sound design and art. The distorted, eerie music layered beneath environmental sounds like the cawing of a crow, Mara's footsteps, the flipping of the park memos, the anguished sounds of the guest. It all contributes to a deeper sense of immersion. Every area within the amusement park is painstakingly detailed to promote environmental storytelling. The discarded soda cups and concessions along the ground and the rusting walls give us a sense of timelessness within Crow Country. The labyrinth-like maps, underground tunnels, and distinctively themed areas are all geared toward encouraging the player to explore and uncover the story. When writing for games, a sense of place is important to make the story that much more real for the player. And with environmental destruction as one of its main themes, you would think an isolated area like an amusement park would work against it. However, the developers offer reminders of the outside world and its degradation by humans within different attractions. The unkempt park, a nod to littering and a broad metaphor for decay and neglect, is reinforced by the swan ride, in which one swan has a chain around its neck and another is lying on its side as if dead. This is symbolic of habitat destruction and water pollution, again caused by mining. There's also the toxic fumes throughout the park used to kill the guest, the fumes within the fairy pond, and the pool itself that is now corrupted and causes the guest to become disfigured and sick. All references to industrial pollution. There's also the very existence of the maze within the haunted hilltop and the excavation sites underground. Both are artificial structures imposed on and under the natural landscape, symbolizing the human tendency to manipulate and control nature for entertainment or profit, as most of the park does. Even the Cosmic Future area is a nod to the consequences of degradation, its unfinished structure foreshadowing the future in which the Earth is no longer inhabitable. Among other things, this is a story about protecting spaces, of preservation. But Crow Country isn't just about preserving our real world. By embracing the stylistic and mechanical elements of classic survival horror games, Crow Country creates a familiar space that appeals to players' nostalgia, a space also worthy of preservation. In a world rapidly advancing with AI and cutting-edge gaming technology, preserving nostalgic games is essential. These games offer a unique sense of identity, inspiration, and a connection to our past selves, allowing us to appreciate our growth and continuity. Rather than constantly reinventing the wheel, nostalgic games remind us of the roots of gaming, bringing comfort and familiarity. They help us reconnect with the experiences that shaped our love for gaming in the first place, creating a rich, immersive sense of place that celebrates both the past and the present. I don't have many critiques for this game. I will say the clues of Elaine's identity are so abundant and in your face from the very beginning that it was evident who she was early on, at least to me. I would have personally liked a more gradual build-up to the reveal, but something I wasn't expecting at all was the futuristic plot twist. One thought I had when the guest attacked Elaine after she unlocked the final elevator was that perhaps this was the original guest who appeared and attacked her 2 years ago. After she kills them, they disintegrate, unlike the other guests we find dead in the park. Maybe the longer they remained alive, the more they mutated until their insides literally became dust. We never learn of the first guest's fate after the park's closure, not through Crow nor Tolman's records, and having it all come full circle to Elaine killing the guest that started it all would make a lot of sense. But we must remember, the first guest isn't the villain here. Edward Crow and his father are to blame for everything, so Elaine's final act against Crow is more fitting. During my first playthrough, I initially thought the name of the land and amusement park alluded to Native American origins, the plot perhaps centering around the indigenous burial ground trope. However, it became clear that Crow Country is actually a metaphor for Edward Crow's pervasive influence over the guest's fate. Crows appear everywhere in the game, from background noises to stuffed animals, trash cans, and the giant crow mascot at the park's entrance. Crow himself seems to be everywhere too, as he keeps calling Elaine throughout the park. This symbolizes Edward Crow's looming presence and his role as the Grim Reaper and orchestrator of the massacre he created. But was he motivated to kill hundreds of people for the sake of gold? According to him, no. He felt driven to finish what his father had started. It's clear Crow is a family man and treasured his time with his father when he was younger. He's also an innovator, an entrepreneur with a penchant for laboratory experiments, and a man who wanted to see his father's legacy carried on. And this is precisely another warning within the game. Innovation doesn't always lead to a happy end. The VHS tapes in Tolman's office are stark reminders of how tragedy can occur when bold innovation becomes reckless ambition. The Titanic was hailed as an unsinkable marvel of engineering, yet it fell victim to the very hubris that declared it invulnerable. The Hindenburg disaster caused by the use and explosion of hydrogen gas could have been prevented if helium were used instead. The United States banned the export of helium, however, and the Hindenburg was re-engineered as a result. And in this case, the pursuit of advanced air travel ultimately overshadowed the critical need for safety. The deployment of the atomic bomb at Hiroshima epitomizes the peril of innovation pushed too far, where the quest for unparalleled military power results in catastrophic human and environmental consequences. Lastly, the 1350 plague, or the Black Death, spread so rapidly due to urbanization and increased trading. We see time and time again that defying natural limits can lead to dire consequences, but it doesn't mean we should stop trying to innovate. Innovation isn't inherently good or evil, but it is powerful, and humans need to approach ambition cautiously and with care. We need to incorporate safety, ethical responsibility, regulation, and oversight, learning from the past, and informed decision-making. Edward Crow failed to do this, and paid the ultimate price along with his victims. But as always, I want to know what you think. Did I go too far down the rabbit hole with this analysis, or do you think there's even more to explore? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Here's another one of my videos, and as always, may your nightmares be strangely cozy.